basically a compressor is something that alters the volume of anything that goes into it. So basically it's called a dynamics processor, and it will turn up or down the volume of the audio that it receives. EQ is predominantly concerned with the removal or the boosting of certain frequencies, and whilst that can affect audio to some volume, to some purpose, it's not really the main point of it, whereas a compressor is purely there to control the volume. The golden rule really is it making it sound good, and do you need it? Because if you put too much compression on your tracks, you're just going to crush the life out of them and make them sound very dull. So this is the FabFilter Pro C, which is an absolutely superb compressor, and the main parameters really are the threshold. So that's the setting by which, when the volume comes into the compressor, when it reaches the threshold that you've set, that's when the compressor will start to work. So when it gets to that volume, that's when the compressor decides it's going to start reducing volume. The next control is the ratio, which is how much is it going to reduce that volume by. So if you had a setting of 5:1, for every 5 decibels that the audio exceeds the threshold you've set, the compressor will let 1 decibel through. So the more you turn that up, the more gain reduction you're going to get, the more the volume is going to go down. Then you have an attack setting, and that's just when the audio has reached the threshold, when it's got to that volume, how long does it take for the compressor to actually kick in. So you can make it wait for so many milliseconds, and that's great for protecting the loud kind of snap at the start of a snare, for example. The accompanying control to that is the release. So when the audio has gone back down under the threshold level, how long is it before the compressor returns the volume back up to normal? How long until it stops compressing, basically? And that's a gradual sort of increase. A couple of other controls quickly. You've got a knee setting, which you can have hard and soft. A hard setting means that when the audio reaches the threshold, the ratio will kick in at exactly the value you have set, so you can have it crush pretty quickly, quite hard. The soft knee, which is a lot more natural, that basically gradually turns the ratio up, if you like, up to where you've got it. So it starts before you reach the threshold, it turns it up, you get to the threshold, and you're still not quite at the ratio you've set, and then a little bit after the threshold it will have turned it up to your ratio. So it's a much more kind of gentle compression. The input gain is just how hard you want to drive the signal into the compressor. Usually you're not going to need to use that because your signal will be loud enough anyway. And the output, ultimately, if you're turning the volume of something down, so you'll turn the peaks down of the audio, you're going to then be able to use the output to turn the entire audio back up, so that now the new peaks are where they were before, but you've obviously turned it down and you've brought the entire level of the audio up now. So your average volume is louder and your perceived volume is louder without creating any digital spikes or peaks. What we want to do, rather than create any kind of harsh pumping, we want some fairly transparent compression. Now I'm going to play the bass line with the drums because it's important to make all of your compression, reverb, EQ, all of your decisions in context with the entire track. So this is what we've got, minus the sub bass, which is absolutely fine. It hasn't got any weird effects on it. So we're going to add a compressor onto our bass here. And because we want something quite transparent, we don't want it pumping a lot, we're going to put the attack right up over 100 milliseconds. I'm going to do the same with the release. In fact, a bit longer there. We go for about 300 milliseconds, and that's purely just the sort of ballpark figures to start with. Then we're going to go with the soft knee, so the ratio is quite gradual, the way that it comes in, and I'm going to pull that back, so I don't want that to be too heavy, somewhere around 3:1. And then what we'll do is we'll pull the threshold down until we're getting something like 5 to 6 dB of gain reduction, because that's the amount that we're seeing a lot of fluctuations, probably about 7 dB. We don't want to completely kill the dynamics on this. You can kind of have a look at, on this particular compressor, the Pro C by FabFilters, if you're particularly a beginner in compression, This is fantastic because it's got a graphical readout, so you can see exactly what you're doing. So you can actually see, but most of the compressors will have this sort of line here, input plotted against output. And so you can see from that the sort of amount of reduction that you're getting. Now I don't want to really crush the life out of this, so I think around 5 dB would be good, maybe 7, but we won't push it too hard. And then what I basically want to do with the release, now that I've got my compressor set up, is pull the release back a little bit, because otherwise the compressor will constantly be compressing. It won't have time to recover between the notes. So it needs to recover, i.e. stop reducing the gain so heavily before the attack of the next note comes in. So that will still provide a bit of definition at the beginning of the notes. The red line is the actual gain reduction, so that's how much it's crushing it. You can see it here, it shows you the colours. You have the graph is plotted with the output on the input as well, so you can see exactly where, and this is a graph of volume by the way, so you can see exactly what you're compressing and how your different settings are affecting it, which is quite handy. There's a point there where the bass is dying down and you can see the red line has gone up. So we've set it so that it stops reducing it there. So when the volume of the bass is low, the compressor is recovering. And so when the next note comes in, it's not still squashing it down. So the next note can come in with a little bit more impact. And then the compressor will get all of that volume nice and tight. So we don't kill basically the beginning of the bass sound. So that's working quite well. That seems to be fairly good at the moment. So the way to check your before and after is basically to turn your compressor off and check what your peak volume is going to be on your output fader. So at the moment it's about -11, and then if I do that with the compressor on, we would expect that to be less because the compressor is obviously crushing the peaks down. But actually it's more, and the reason is the output gain's already set to +5. So let's just pull that back and now have a look. So we've got -15 now. So if we actually add the 5 dB that we had before that was just sitting on the output there, we're roughly in the same ballpark. We give it, what is it, give or take 0.4 of a dB. So that's a great comparison. We can now turn the compressor on and off with the same peak volume and listen to hear what the difference is before and after without us hearing the compressor turning it up massively, which will give us a false idea that actually it's doing a better job than it is. You can see we've got much more stable volume, and the average volume of the bass has gone up, so that will sit much better in the mix. And because the average volume is what your perceived volume is, you might actually want to turn it down a little bit now overall because it sounds louder, and that could give some more room in the mix for other sounds.